Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final episode of Redefining Customer Journey Management. And today we're going to do things a little different. It was our job to bring together world-class CX professionals and deconstruct their strategies, tactics, struggles, techniques, and to give you methods and perhaps even resources to start redefining customer journey management in your organization too. And today, we will create a resource for you. We're going to distill all the lessons learned. So my name is Jochem van der Veer, the co-founder of Dedo, and we're a software platform for journey management. And we're designed to give teams an overview and to manage their workflow from insight to implementation in one place. And my co-host today, as always, is Harold Lamberts, the founder of Essence, the CX consultancy specialized in customer journey design. No doubt that there's a match, given that tools and way of working go hand in hand. And as I already explained, that's not really the reason why we are here today. In our domain, there's something happening, the domain of customer experience, CX, and we've gone past the journey mapping stage. We went from all over the place to one place. Companies are transforming towards journey management, as we have seen with the past episodes and our guests. And we have actually made it our mission to help accelerate this change, not only for the companies and their leaders that we work with, but also in general. So customer journey management to us is becoming the next big thing in business. And we use this series of live streams to discover exactly how. Today we're flipping the script. We are at topic number 5, monitoring and capturing results. Instead of talking about metrics and KPIs, we are capturing results, and actually we are going to do that from our guests, harvesting the knowledge and turning it into something actionable. Today, we'll turn insights into a checklist, a list of questions to ask yourself in your role at your company, ultimately helping you to define where to focus on next and know why. And the best thing, at the end of this session, we'll share this checklist live. So wrapping it up, sharing it with you so you can fill it in, see where you stand, and share it around with your team. Basically, capturing the knowledge from our guest, condense it into one system, a little checklist. How wonderful. So we'll recap everything topic by topic. Herman, who has been with us from the start, will visualize and distill the learnings and wrap it up as we go. And as it is a live session, we will also have a few polls based on the topics we discussed. And there is a lot of room for Q&A during the session. At the end, we take questions as they come. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. So please send them in the chat below or use the Q&A, whatever you prefer. So let's dig in. And before we go at it, Harold, maybe you can help us recap the topics from the last 4 sessions for folks who didn't see all the episodes, or if you did, maybe a little refresher for ourselves.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks. So yes, we started a few months ago with the first webinar in which we had a set of speakers, guest speakers invited. And we started by defining a set of topics together with these experts, such as Marloes Bos from Bol, Eva van der Veer from Selfstroom, and also Rob Pauw from PostNL. And 4 main topics we identified. And Ruben Meijland, also former VP from Eventbrite. And 4 main topics identified around customer journey management being organizing which journeys are important in your organization, organizing also the teams around it, which teams take up which journeys, but also collaboration within those teams, like how do you collaborate in these teams to improve that customer journey, and last but not least, how do you capture the results of these activities that you undertake along a customer journey perspective as an organization. And then continuous learning back into that cycle, really to make it a closed loop activity to drive really how, as an organization, you really make customer-centric collaboration, central to your way of working. So in the consecutive webinars after this one, so this was the first webinar in which we discussed how what are the key pillars of customer journey management. We then focused in on each of these 4 topics. So the second webinar was actually here, the first bullet of organizing journeys, in which we spoke with Niels Korsten from Vodafone Ziggo, and also Jons Jansen from former CIO of Ace & Tate. around, your customer journey framework at Vodafone. What is the structure of customer journeys that you agree to use company-wide? And with Jons focusing more on how do you link actually your journeys into technology, and basically his saying of technology is the rails of your customer journey, of delivering it. So that was the first one, very interesting one, around how you set up your journey system, your journey framework, basically, that you going to operate against. Then in the third webinar, we focused on topic number 2, organizing teams. And this was with Stephanie Pelsmakers from ING, focusing really on how you organize your team and the pros and cons of having a centralized versus decentralized organization and coordinating customer experience. To a large extent also related to how large the organization is, I think. And of course, it depends. There's more than one ways of doing it. And on Wilco Dona from RTL, also his focus on making sure that customer centricity is already embedded in goal setting, so that customer centricity is not an afterthought or a side effect, but really implicit in how you drive goals in multidisciplinary teams. So that's really the second one, and we'll dive into that as well in this webinar. And then the last time we focused on how you collaborate within those teams, and we had Maaike van Ballengooien from Gideon and Min Jurek from KPN Network, also discussing how customer journeys are also linked to your core operation as an organization, and them both being from very operational service offering in a B2B fashion as well. They really drive customer journeys from an operational team perspective, and therefore actually achieving great impact because they're so closely linked to their operational execution. So yeah, so that's and now on the fourth, we actually trying like let's practice what we preach, and also monitor and capture our results of these sessions, and implicitly we'll also discuss how we capture results of these activities. So yeah, as you can see, that's a lot of learning and a lot of best practice that we've took from our guest speakers. And what we really want is to make you benefit from all these learnings, but in a tangible, easy to use fashion. So of course, if you watch 4 webinars, it's a lot of content to digest. And Jochem and I were thinking, what would be easier than to basically shape this into a checklist that you can use as a starting point for yourself to define, where do we stand as an organization in terms of customer journey management. So today we'll dive into these, and we'll recap on quite a few of these findings that I mentioned. And then, as Jochem already mentioned, at the end of this session, we'll directly also share that checklist with you, so you can play around with it and see where you stand. So that's it in a nutshell.
This one will be the most challenging for Herman, and see if we can keep up. So how we're gonna do it is like take the 4 topics. We're gonna go one by one. I'm gonna recap quickly what we've learned. We already prepared some of the learnings and rewatched everything ourselves, so we can capture these, turn them into the checklist if we can, really define the checks. And then do some polls also to see how the audience today is doing, and wrap it up as a checklist at the end. So maybe we can just dive straight in and start with organizing journeys, and maybe just to recap in detail, but also to start building the checklist. What have you seen? What really stood out if you really talk about organizing journeys in your organization? I mean, no journey management without customer journey, so that would be the first place to start. But what are the key things that stand out? And then we're going to build the checklist from these little nuggets, things that you bring up. Yeah.
See, the word customer journey says it all, yeah? So if you really want to drive customer journey, I mean, first of all, you have to understand the customer, and you have to understand your journey. So what we've learned, I think, from the first webinars is also that a clear understanding of that customer, who is that customer, and capture that understanding in well-defined customer profiles or personas is super crucial to start with the customer itself. So that customer journeys, of course, are not a goal in itself. They're a tool to to create customer focus in your organization and to drive customer-centric decision making. So one of the things we noticed is, starting with a clear understanding across the organization, not based on assumptions, but based on data and research of who
talking to people, right? Talking to people,
talking
doing
to actual
interviews,
customers,
understanding
and
them.
not making lots of assumptions internally, and to define what are those customer needs, what are we actually trying, who are we actually trying to serve, and what are the needs of the people who actually pay for our service. So in the end, they're going to make your company a success or not. So I think that's really where we started. Say, hey, we need to make sure that they are well defined, but not only well defined, but also effectively shared across the organization. Because it's great to have great personas, but if half of the organization doesn't know about them, then what's the point? So I think it's also very important to make sure that there is a single set of those profiles that are also effectively used and shared along the organization, so that all the teams are also enabled to work with them. I think that's one of the first, I would say, Jochem, that we heard from both for actually all four speakers in that first session, that were crucial to have that clear understanding of who the customer is.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember from Marloes was that to build that understanding, she did not only validate them internally or with the research they did, create this vivid personas that are truly focusing on the needs of their customers, but they also were able to turn the personas into something they could quantify. So tagging each individual customer based on the mindset they have. Now, how they did it, it's obviously some abracadabra, but it really helped her to share or create that shared understanding. So not only validate a persona from a qualitative perspective, but also from a quantitative perspective. So these little personas then become the actors in your journeys.
That's a good point, because you also need to, if you can also identify each customer and understand which profile they represent, then you can also serve them better. So I think that's a good way, and actually not done well by many companies. I mean, maybe quite a few companies have a clear understanding of what customer needs are, but then can you actually identify them in execution to also serve them optimally? That's, I think, a good point.
Yeah. This webinar, by the way, is also, we say we go past the journey mapping stage, but one of the other things that we know is very important is have a standardized approach to journey mapping. So without going into too much detail of how to do it, I mean, a lot of our audience already knows how to do it. It's more like how to organize it, how to systemize it, and how to standardize it. Is there anything that we can learn from our guests when it comes to standardizing your journeys and the way you map them?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it's great to understand these customers, but it's 10 times better to really understand them in the context of your journey. So because then you can also say not only what are their needs, but also what are their needs in the initial phase, in the onboarding phase, or in the usage phase, or in the support phase, basically, of your journey. And then it becomes also much more clear to each team in an organization how they can act on it. And I think especially when you collaborate between teams and between different disciplines in an organization, it is crucial to also standardize the way you act on journeys, because otherwise it makes cross-team collaboration super difficult if everybody uses different formats for journeys or different level of detail. So I think one of the things that also came out of that discussion, especially with Niels also from Vodafone, is to really have a company-wide agreement on how do you structure those journeys, and how do you not only on a journey level but also how do you connect the journeys between each other, so you have a real structure and a journey system, if you will, to really base your collaboration around. So that should really help drive a collaboration between teams, I think.
Yeah. Can we just, because this is one of the topics that we get, at least at Data, get a lot of questions about, like, how do you structure these journeys into a framework? I mean, okay, validated personas, clear. We need to have a standard process in place for mapping so that all the teams use a similar approach to mapping these journeys so that the things can be compared and used. Niels at Vodafone came up with a leveled approach where they had like a big picture journey, a macro journey, if you will, to some that will make sense, where like the broad strokes of the business, the stage of the business are represented. And then the journeys get smaller and smaller. So like the tactical journeys or the project journeys or the touch point journeys, even if you will. Minu in the last series came and shared with us her approach, where you would have a life cycle model where maybe the whole customer life cycle from the moment they think about solving their problem or having a problem all the way to churning or renewing, or in her case having the fiber delivered to their home, is basically split up into journeys horizontally over the lifespan of your customer. There's not one way of doing it. What do you see if there are different ways of creating a hierarchy of journeys, or if these are the two main ways of looking at it? I mean, there are surely different things that you've observed in the work that
I think that's why it's a crucial activity, because you can't say there's a one size fits them all kind of solution to this. We, for example, have done a lot of work with multiple airports like Brussels Airport, but also Schiphol Airport. And the way that an airport serves is very linear, from arriving at the airport to boarding and security, and then boarding and then flying and returning. So it's for 90% of the customers, it's the same linear experience. I think we also talked to ING, for example, very different, because some people open an account or others start with a mortgage, or so it's not a linear. And in e-commerce, we see with Bol or maybe with other companies, maybe very much more in need of micro transactional journeys that companies want to manage. And smaller companies with a single service offering, they might only have one uber macro journey that it basically is the whole chain, like a bit like we saw with Selfstrom, is installation of solar panels. Is actually a much more simpler setup. So I think that shows that there is no magic to everyone should do it like this. I think it really links to your core service offering and the size of your organization, and then you have to define what is the right journey framework for us. And I think that's why we also said it's crucial that you think through this carefully before you put the system in place, because it's actually a strategic choice and not just an operational choice. So I think I don't know if you see the same in your clients with Dedu, Jochem, but I can imagine that's also one of the reasons why you guys built in that flexibility into your tool, because there's no one size fits all solution.
Yeah, and because we don't want you to be overwhelmed. I mean, especially in large organizations, there can be a lot of customer journeys and different services and products that you have. So, if you only focus the big picture, then it can take a long time to map everything and put everything together. So rather, we say like start bottom up. Just take the project that you're working on, or take the objective you have, make the journey, standardize that way of working, and then start connecting it and building it bottom up. But the basics would be have the hierarchy or the framework in mind that you want to ultimately have as an overview. That is a good way to work towards. And yeah, maybe that's a nice segue to the tool. I mean, of course, we from Dedu advise Dedu, but having something in place that is not only a PDF or just some flat poster-driven design, whether it's your digital post-it walls or something that only some of the experts in your organization can use to create journeys, but having something flexible in place to standardize the way you work and to capture the journeys, but also to organize them. I think that is a no-brainer. So having a tool in place to connect these journeys, and like you said, be flexible in organizing them, I think is an essential step.
Well, and that makes it actionable for teams, because if you only have one big macro journey, like no single agile team is responsible for that entire journey, because it's probably distributed across multiple teams. So if you really want teams to feel ownership over their chunk in the whole service offering, it's also important that they kind of feel ownership of that piece. So I think being able to structure it that way so that you can delegate ownership, and while at the same time allowing governance to control and coordinate things. I think that's a good is important to realize.
Yeah. So
Okay.
let's see. So we have about 5 things now. Herman, thank you for drawing. So actually, what we're saying is to get this done. So we basically see these 5 elements that you need to see in your organization if you have. So having validated personas in place, having a standardized method for journey mapping, having a system of journeys, so one place to capture them, putting them into a hierarchy, like what is a top level journey, what is a bottom level journey, or is it a horizontal journey, is it a system of journeys, and having a tool in place to connect them. These are basically the 5 things that we've seen our guests share with us, but we also see in our experience with working with our clients. So I want to launch a little poll to see how today's audience is doing. So for folks who are rewatching this, sorry about it, but we want to make this into a live thing. So when it comes to organizing journeys, I think the most important question is, are all journeys organized into a system? Defined system, a little broad, is it a hierarchy, is it a leveled approach, doesn't matter, but do you have a system in place? Even though if it's on paper right now, it's just a sketch, but at least everyone understands the system and it's put there, will be interesting to see. So the answers are very straightforward. So yes, we're working on it, or no, not yet. So let's figure out what people are doing right now. The 5 checks that we have now come up with will be part of this this checklist that we're building as we go and share with you later on. But basically, I think this captures organizing journeys pretty nicely. How do you think we're missing anything when we're talking about organizing journeys and recapping a little bit what we learned?
I think if you start with those, you're in pretty good shape. So, I mean, there's always, I think customer journey management is never complete, but I think that's a great start, I think.
Yeah. So we see people are working on it, or they don't have something in place yet. And that's also something that we've seen. Journey management is fairly new. A lot of organizations are now working on it, realizing like, hey, everything is disconnected, everything is all over the place, it needs to go to one place. So that's also something that is true for most companies. It is or will be a topic soon, and going to become an even more important discipline.
I think it also makes sense, Jochen, like now that customer journeys have been adopted and becoming the standard, the next question is then, okay, how do we actually operationalize that? So it makes sense that it's reaching this maturity level that people are now starting to look for ways to actually make it more operational and move the customer journey map away from being a research document to basically the structure around which you drive innovation.
Or organized teams.
Or organized teams.
Nice. Yeah. So let's go to the second thing. The second webinar we focused on, or the second topic we focused on, organizing teams. What was interesting about, maybe the differences between what we've observed at ING versus RTL, different organization, different ways. What stood out to you?
What I remember is that, of course, ING being a super, very large organization with also a wide product portfolio, that they opted for a central customer experience hub. Stephanie talked about that from being the CX lead at ING, around so many organizations and so many squads and tribes working on this, that there was a need to coordinate it centrally to standardize this way of working. So the size of the organization also requires coordination, and standardization is a full-time job. And I think that's also why it makes sense for a company like ING, whether it's the best solution or not, I don't know. But it's definitely sensible to say, okay, we need a team of 4 people who can really help the rest of the organization to work in this customer-centric fashion, and to think about customer journeys and how people collaborate, and how that is integrated into the way of working of tribes and squads. Because ING, of course, being one of the first companies to realize the agile transformation in the Netherlands, following that Spotify model, and that's already years ago. So they've felt all the growing pains, but they've also addressed them to a large extent. So I think that's what stood out to me from an ING, and I know that Stephanie is making really good progress on also evangelizing customer experience as an important aspect in a financial institution like ING, which is a huge achievement. And then on the other end, Wilco from RTL saying, oh, we're very hands-on. We have teams who really project and goal-oriented, and we create self-sufficient teams. So no central coordination, no self-sufficient team with clearly defined roles, which also makes a lot of sense. Not that RTL is a small organization, but I think it is much more compact and also less diverse product offering in that sense. That it makes sense that they drive it that way. The similarity between the two actually is that both of them believe in multidisciplinary team setup. So whether you drive that from central coordination or decentralized, that's I guess that's something you need to look at an organizational design perspective. But both of them believed in multidisciplinary setup, and both of them believe that customer-centric thinking is not something you do a nice to have, but it's like integrated into your way of working, and that customer success is business success is what I recall from their vision. So super interesting that they have a completely different approach in terms of organizational setup, yet still try to achieve exactly the same thing. So that's what I remember from that talk.
Maybe one of the reflections is that whether you're moving away from very siloed or vertically organized people and teams, that you realize that if you work multidisciplinary across teams, journeys are the same, right? They go through all these artificial walls in your company. The customer doesn't even know that you have departments, supporting their journey or completing their goal or a task-based journey. Would you then also say, because this is something that I know a lot of organizations are struggling with, is would you say it is important to have a dedicated team responsible for each journey, or what is the idea there? I mean, in some cases it will be, in other cases it won't, but focusing on the journey rather than the team, I think, is the logical next step, if you ask me.
For sure, and I think the team structure is there to work on the journey, not the other way around. So I think that's true. And it's just also a question of what dedicated means. Like, does dedicated mean that you really organize your entire organization that way? Or sometimes I also have seen examples, I think Rob from PostNL mentioned this as well, that not that team structure has to be the org chart. It can also be a virtual team. So sometimes it can be a virtual team of people from different departments shaping a journey team, but they still report into their functional departments, which is possible. What I think is important is clear ownership. So whether that's a formal structure or a virtual structure, I think what is really important is that people feel clear ownership of that customer journey, and also have the mandate to act on it, and also are incentivized to act on it. So I think if management is saying yes, it's important, but when push comes to shove, they never prioritize for it, then how can you expect organizations to really go for it? So I think commitment, executive commitment, and also I remember Stephanie mentioning this the sandwich model of bottom up, you need to drive it, and top down, that needs to support it. I think that executive ownership or sponsorship and also clear ownership in the teams. Yeah, if that's a dedicated team, I think that's super important to have clarity around.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what about having a single role, or multiple people can have that role, or a few roles, to have the complete overview, keep track of the big picture, like Niels clearly had that role at Vodafone. What are your reflections on that?
I guess it depends a bit on what I hear from them. It depends a bit on how diverse your portfolio is. So I think if your entire, like the Schiphol case I mentioned, if everything is around passenger experience is connected, then definitely it makes sense to have some sort of central governance of somebody who's connecting it all. If for example, with Philips, you have completely separate product categories, like medical, hospital versus home home or personal health or home appliances, they're so separate in terms of that it can also be um, per department. So it could also be that there is still one person per maybe per product category that coordinates. So I think it is not a defined rule that there has to be one person in the company who oversees it all. But I do think there is a need for some sort of coordination a governance responsibility of somebody who has a mandate to coordinate. Because otherwise, the customer journey becomes a distributed ownership, and nobody's really responsible, and everybody's responsible, and then there's never really a mandate. And I think that's a disadvantage, and making it more difficult to really realize impact.
Yeah, so you can also say that even though there's not maybe a role that oversees all journeys, at least a role or a group of people that can oversee customer goals and turn those into team goals, or at least have an overview of what the customer is trying to achieve, whether you turn that into journeys, KPIs, or both. These disciplines or these roles need to be created in order to sustain this way of working or this way of thinking in organizations. Is that right?
I think that's what I heard, and to have it on a journey level and maybe also on a macro level. And how you exactly organize that, I think, is also part of your journey system that you created, like we discussed in the first topic. So I think, but yeah.
So not all journeys need to have the same team structure to support it. Is that what you mean? So a different type of journey, like a transactional journey, very task-based, can be supported by a group of developers under a product manager with a designer, maybe? Is that what you're saying, where there is?
I think so. I think and that is, of course, there's a bit of a discussion around what is a journey and how, terminology, but I think if we really...
Well, let's have that one. Let's have that one. What is, how can we help people understand what a journey is? Because it doesn't start at sign up. I think we can all agree to the customer journey does not always start at when you click sign up or create account or get the mortgage. But what is a journey?
Yeah, I think a sequence of customer interactions, and you can define how all the way from a life cycle journey, which is maybe a 5-year relationship between a customer and a company, all the way to a single shopping cart transaction, which could be, a micro journey. And I think, of course, different companies use different terminology for this, but I think we what it actually means is that you have a sequence of interactions that a customer experiences that we're trying to manage, and that's an ideal structure to make sure that you maintain a customer perspective when you're improving your service or your product. And I think as long as you stick to that, then it doesn't matter if it's meta or micro, and it helps you maintain customer focus, which I think is the main purpose of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe a little side note here, whether it's customer interactions that are sequenced or not, what's very important is that in between the interactions you have with a customer, or he or she has with your brand or product, there are moments in between that you're not there, right? And the power of a journey map is actually that you can visualize what happens when you're not there, when your company is not there, when your product or service is not there, right? What are the customers feeling, thinking in between, doing without you? Doing elsewhere. And when you interact with them, which is part of the journey through your touch points or your landing pages or your flows or your services, that is part of the journey, but that is not the journey, right? That is what we can measure, we can see in our dashboards, but the journey map can show what's going on before, during, and after these interactions. And I think that is important to underline when we're thinking about a journey. It holds basically all the steps, the actions, the feelings, and the things people do to complete their goals or to solve their problems, right? Or to just complete the task if it is a very mundane thing to do. So keeping that in mind is essential. I know we're digressing a little bit, but
well, that's the only thing I would add is because this debate or this dialogue that we're having about it also shows it's not that simple. And so I think one of the things that also became apparent in the first few webinars is that the importance of also having customer centric experts on a team like this is crucial, of course. So while customer journeys is not just for service designers or customer journey experts, it is also important to have that expertise in house to really maintain that perspective. So I think that people the right roles in those journey teams is also important.
Let's zoom in or zoom out a little bit, Herman, if you will. Let's check it out. So what we're discussing is having dedicated journey teams or focus teams for each journey in place. Then the second thing we see is that it is essential to have a role in your organization that oversees the journeys or even the customer goals, and then have customer goals defined from a customer perspective. Or your goals in general, are they defined from the customer perspective? And then the roles in your teams should address the specific journey. So not every journey has the same type of people in a journey team. And then maybe one more thing to add to this, what I also noticed is that, I don't know, I think it was Rob from Posteno said it, but collecting insights from the customer. I mean, we have dedicated UX researchers, we have people focusing on getting the voice of customer in, and we have the support teams focusing on figuring out what people need. But basically what we see, I don't know if you agree, but I would like to add one more thing, is that making insight collecting a shared responsibility, so everyone is involved in bringing insights into the journey map, into the personas, and looking at what customers are doing, is I think also one of the essential things when organizing teams, that everyone has the mandate to talk to customers, figure out what they need. Or should we put that somewhere else? I think it belongs here.
No, it's great. I mean, it's of course true for, I mean, all the 4 topics are integrated, but I mean, this I think is that's a great side effect of creating these teams, is that you also generate like a shared goal and a shared responsibility, which is a disadvantage of functional departments where everybody stick to their own responsibility. I think the journeys, really the multidisciplinary aspect of journey teams, really creates like a shared responsibility to look after customers jointly. I think that's a great addition.
Nice. Let's do another poll, one more, because whether or not you have a very well-defined multidisciplinary team for your journey, or you organize it differently, is essential to have dedicated teams or people responsible for your journeys. So I'm curious to hear the audience. Do you have a dedicated team responsible for each journey? And the answers are yes, teams are organized based on journeys. Some have it, others don't, or not at all. And the results will probably vary. And I also want to speed us up a little bit, because we're now like halfway through. We need to do the other half as well. So it's pretty cool to see that some people already have teams organized based on journeys. Some people are working on it and having dedicated teams on certain journeys. So that's definitely a good sign, and we see that happening more and more in the market. But maybe the third thing for us to focus on today is actually the cross collaboration, or the cross journey collaboration. So maybe just recap. I mean, we had to make a small title, so it was very punchy and clear what we mean, but maybe just define again cross journey collaboration. What is that again, Harold? And then we'll dig into what we learned.
No, I mean, first topic, we have the journeys, and the second topic is like what teams, how do you set up teams to drive through those journeys? But then, of course, how do these teams then collaborate? Yeah, who are, we said multidisciplinary teams, is there's a product owner in it, is maybe there's a business analyst in it, maybe there's a marketeer in it, maybe there's a service designer in it. So it's also important, like who has which role in that? Like who does what, and who is clearly responsible for what? It is important to standardize, especially if you want to scale this in large organizations. More and more companies want to scale this as a new way of working, maybe following an agile transformation or something like that. They want to scale this customer-centric way of working across journeys. And then, of course, it's important to define those roles and who does what. So I think that's what we try to discuss also with Maaike and from Gideon, and also Menu from KPI Network. And what's particularly interesting in their case is that they both work from what I remember, both from an operational perspective, and that it also shows that connecting execution with roadmap and with customer centricity really gives you the leverage to act and to make an impact. And because you don't have the challenge of having to sell it to the execution side of the business. And I think that's a nice example of how multidisciplinary teams are important for making customer journeys really work. Because you can make beautiful journeys, but if there's no link to execution, then it remains a beautiful poster. And if we really connect the different disciplines, then it becomes a structure along which you innovate and improve your service offering. So that's, I think, what we saw in that session, and actually in all the sessions. So yeah, the conclusion there, I think, is that customer journeys is not just for service designers or customer journey experts. It's a structure along which the different disciplines can collaborate, because it just provides that customer perspective. And so it's not a research tool, and it's not a project. It is that structure, and it basically gives a structure along which those disciplines can collaborate. So that's really, what I remember from that discussion. What it does raise the question is then, okay, if all those disciplines then collaborate along that journey, how do you prioritize? Because I'm sure everyone has great ideas. And how do you prioritize then which ones you do and which ones you don't? So that must be, a combination of efforts, business impact expected, customer value, NPS, all kinds of inputs that you can think of. But so you also need kind of like a structured approach around how you prioritize. And of course, a journey team can think of that for themselves. But if you want to scale this in an organization, it's also important to kind of standardize that, I think, to say, okay, how do we as an organization do those things? And you see more and more organizations organizing like PI events or tribe roadmap sessions or et cetera, to really, and customer centricity becomes more and more important factor in that. And I think we would be a great advocate for that.
Yeah, of course. And that's one of the things that we see, at least, that a lot of the things that we're developing right now in Data are based on getting prioritization right. Because in the journey, you can obviously focus on what are the pain points, what are the things that we want to focus on, but capturing opportunities there and then taking them out of individual journeys, the smaller journeys, and then bringing all these opportunities together in one place, looking at them and having a shared understanding of, hey, these are all the things that are happening across the customer experience, gives you a different discussion than focusing on a single journey, which is still, almost focused with the blinders on. So actually, what you were just saying was actually a pretty good summary. So having a standardized approach to prioritizing, what to do next and know why is essential. But also balancing, I think you touched upon it a little bit, is balancing the efforts based on the business and on the customer needs. I mean, if we would only focus on customer needs, we'd all be charities. And there is a business, there needs to be sustained. It wants to drive some results, probably revenue and money in the end. And it's fine, as long as we both get value from it for when you look at it from the customer and the business. So that will change if you have a customer journey system in place representing the customer as well as the business, because in most companies, the balance is a little bit off still. It's mostly business, right? So what you didn't maybe mention, but what I also like is what Minu highlighted in her talk, is knowing who is responsible in your organization for journeys, for what journey, who or which team is responsible, is also kind of crucial, because she is known with her team for maintaining the journeys, improving it, and keeping track of what is important and what's not. And the operational teams, talking to people, making the fiber connections in their homes, actually know how to find her and send feedback or insights from customers directly to her that she can use to put in her journey map. So having understanding of who's responsible for what is something maybe overlooked in a lot of organizations, but it's very crucial to have. So that it's not like a service design thing or a UX design thing, but it's a shared thing where we know who is responsible.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's actually the same. We touched a bit on it with the organizing teams aspect, and the same is also once you know who's responsible for which journey, that also allows you to share that information with the right people. So I think being able to identify who's responsible for what and also who to connect with to improve A, B, or C. Of course, that helps you navigate in the organization how you can jointly improve your customer experience. So I think that's um, awareness of who's responsible, but also awareness of the customer insights and the journeys goes hand in hand. Yeah, so I think that's an additional topic of making that information accessible to everyone in the organization. So it doesn't only sit in the head of the customer journey owner, but it is actually available for everyone to act on.
Yeah, yeah, definitely in a digital environment, preferably, so that when the journey owner is on sick leave, you can still have access, right? Also important. So just let's see if Herman was able to capture this. We had like 5 things that stood out. So having a standardized approach, we covered that. Single system to prioritize. Then having a balance between customer needs and business needs, having a system in place that can, make fact-based decision. There's less opinions, less bias. And then the third one was, do people know who's responsible for your journey and where to find the ones that are maintaining and improving it? As well as the fourth one, having a shared, accessible place where everyone can find what the journeys are and where people are working on them. So that, and I think you started with a nice anecdote from Meike at Gideon, who said, like, get the operational teams to embrace the journeys. They need to know and understand the bigger picture as well. So do your journeys get embraced by the operational teams or just by the ones creating and maintaining it? And the first one is obviously more promising, that everyone has a shared understanding of these journeys. That sums it up pretty nicely. Let's see, for the folks at home tuning in, about cross-journey collaboration. Do you guys have a standardized approach to prioritizing efforts across journeys? I'm giving Herman a little slack to catch up, so everyone is doing the poll while he's drawing like crazy. So do you have a standardized approach? And this is often very hard to get, because there will be different methods at different teams using different methodologies in place, especially in large organizations. That's what we see. So coming to some shared understanding is a difficult task, but not something you cannot overcome. It has been done and it can be done. So I will end the poll right now and see exactly, like, there is some traction going on, but not a single one today in our audience has figured it out entirely. So there is some work to do here, folks, and we know that this is the tricky part. As promised today, we will also focus on topic 4, monitoring data and capturing results, as we're doing that with this webinar. We can reflect a little bit based on the things that we've learned and obtained through our previous episodes, but we'll also share a little bit of our experience. We're going to do it a little bit faster, also considering the time we have. I want to be mindful of our time today. Maybe capturing results, monitoring data. I mean, everyone's measuring everything all the time. We have big data, and there's this famous quote that if data were the answer, we would all be six-pack billionaires right now, right? So big data is not the answer, but how do you capture results and monitor data? What is your experience with this when it comes to journey management?
Yeah, what I think a kind of a trend that we see happening is that in the last 2 years, we were all measuring NPS like madmen, and of course NPS is an indicator, and it tells you something about brand loyalty and how positive people think about you as a company. It does not really reflect how good your customer experience is necessarily, though, and it really is too high level to really act on it. So I think if you really want to structurally improve customer experience, NPS is too vague. So we need a more structured system, and I think measuring more tangible KPIs along your customer journey can really compartmentalize your journey, and then say you can act on smaller interactions and smaller components. And yes, all these things combined will improve your NPS, but there is no way to directly influence NPS with single activity. So I think that's also what we saw, to really, the customer journey can really help structure all the sequence of interactions of your service offering, and find how you actually experiment with improvements, measure if that experiment is actually an improvement to what you had, and then also document that improvement, or maybe the failure. Yeah, so that's fine. I mean, of course, we experiment with things that don't work. So we all know that. So I think it's important that we document as a company what worked, what didn't work, and what have we not tried yet. And I think then also with people moving on, and with new people coming on board, you also create some corporate learning, and you also make sure that not everyone is repeating the same research every 3 years, because you kind of document and become more and more intelligent as a company, and you understand what works and what doesn't work, and then you then feed into that for the next cycle, and that's how you basically facilitate this continuous improvement of build, measure, learn culture in your organization. So I think
hang on just a second, because we're going pretty fast. So one thing is measuring the actual data. Like, you say NPS might be too big, so you want to look at the journeys and then figure out what to measure to figure out how customers are actually doing. So turning it into smaller KPIs that you can measure on a journey level, maybe on a journey step or phase. But then the other way, what you just described, is more on what are we going to do about it, right? Data tells you what, then you figure out what people actually do, what they need. You're going to make new things, solutions. You're going to do better service design. You're going to change the way your offering is structured, maybe. And then you're going to track that as well. But what you're saying is it is very important not only to track then the results, like do people like it, do our metrics go up, but also capture what you have learned along the way that didn't work.
Yeah.
Those are two different things. Yeah.
Sure. And then of course also define which KPIs are the right ones to use along that journey. And so sometimes you can measure customer satisfaction, or in some cases you can also measure conversion rates or loyalty rates, or you can, you also have to look at how detailed is my journey and what is the right KPI. Is it a customer effort score, or is it a customer satisfaction score, or is it, what is it? So I think that's also important to really think about what are the what are the right KPIs for the right level of interactions in a journey, and then use those to interpret whether you're improving your customer experience or not.
Yeah, and also across different channels. I mean, what I remember from Jons from Ace and Tate, he said, look, our customers are buying sunglasses. They start their journey on one device, then go to the shop, and then continue on another device. They have just one experience of buying a sunglass. Well, we see in our data all these different data points, and the journey is disconnected. So having a system that can also make distinctions in that, I think is something that we see is also going to be a very big endeavor when you have all these journeys. Like, how do you measure across channels, or do the omni-channel metric approach? That's something that you can relate to.
Absolutely. I mean, measuring your experience online is great, but it's only half the story. I mean, depends of course a bit on your service, but in the end, your customer will, be happy or not depending on the entire experience, and not just because you had a great website. So I think it's definitely being able to measure omni-channel and connect measurements in a journey perspective is important, because you can have a fantastic app, but if the rest of the journey is not great, then a customer will not be happy with the experience. So it's definitely also important to capture those results on a journey level. So you maintain that journey perspective in research, but also in collaboration, and also in measurements, and that keeps your customer focus front of mind in that whole innovation loop. And that's I think crucial to do in this fourth component.
Yeah, one of the things that I have a hard time figuring out, or maybe not hard time figuring out, but I observe a lot of different ways of doing it, is what are the things that you do directly that, you know, is maybe a small change, like change a little bit of the form fields in your onboarding sign up form maybe, versus a big change in your core offering. Um, Everything can be tied back into the customer journey. Once you've mapped your current journey and you know exactly what people do, what they think, what they feel, where your services add value to that journey for them, and then you figure out an opportunity for your business. So some of it might be small, you can just put on the backlog right away. Other things might be big. I know a lot of people struggle to find the right level of communicating this when you talk about the journeys, and to also figure out a way to prioritize that. Is that also part of capturing results here, or should we put that somewhere else? Like working from your journey to a solution, measuring it, and then getting it back into your journey, whether it's a big thing, a complete new innovation, or it's just a new landing page, or maybe even smaller, like a change on a landing page. How do you see that?
No, I think for sure. I mean, of course, as long as it's manageable level of content that you're documenting. I mean, but what we see actually as an agency a lot is that um, we do research, and then a year later the same question comes up, and then you feel, oh, we've already done this, and it's just because it's so hard for new people to join to find out what has already been learned by the organization. I think a customer journey can provide the structure to connect that insight to, so that it's also much more easy to retrieve learnings from the past. And I think so, small or large, innovation or optimization, that doesn't really matter. I think it's important to track. And then, yeah, I'm sure there's still ways we can do that better, but that would be a great advancement, because I think there's still a lot of effort and budget being spent on things that companies actually already know somewhere. So, yeah.
I like that a lot. So let's do one more poll, and then we're going to wrap it up a little bit, because I see Herman has caught up with us. That's pretty cool. So what about you at home? Are you able to measure CX across your channels on a, not only are you able to measure it, but would you be able to measure it in a meaningful way, to see if you can understand your customer experience from a data perspective? Or maybe like Harold just described, like, do we have system in place to document what didn't work, capture the learnings, put it back into our journey, so that, you know, everyone following the organization can, who later joins the organization, can also learn from that. So that's an interesting question. Some people even have it, I see here in the poll, so well done. And others are focusing on it, which is actually where a lot of our listeners will be, and the people that are tuning in today and listening this later. So let's just zoom out and see what the results are. And we actually came up with a lot of little checks and balances, which I like what Remy in the chat is saying, like, this should also be a way of working. This is a way of working, obviously, if you ask us, but there is a lot of work to do to get the way of working set up. And this truly seems like a rigorous checklist. And on the background, we actually have, and this is going to be for you guys at home right now, we have made this into a live checklist. I'm going to share it in the chat. But before I do that, we are going to wrap up. This was super information dense. I hope that we were able to capture the lessons and distill it in just an hour. I mean, an hour is not enough, but it seems we came pretty far. And the checklist will be in your chat inbox here. We'll share it obviously after the series with a nice recording for everyone. But it's something you can do right now and get a score and see how you're actually doing in this whole world of redefining customer journey management in your company. So before I share the link, let me just say thank you. It has been a blast. We have been doing 5 episodes, one every month, quite intense if you ask me. And first, let's thank Herman, who has been with us every day. So Herman, thanks a lot for your drawing skills and your patience with us, and also your speed with the way you actually were able to capture this. So on behalf of everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thanks, Herman. And also, let's say thanks to some people behind the scenes you may not have heard of. So Jeroen, Amy, and later on Ragnar, who have been helping us to reach hundreds of people to get and join us in these live sessions, to help them rewatch the episodes, script them, prepare for the next ones. It was truly amazing to collaborate on this project. And last but not least, Harold, thank you for making the time. I mean, managing one of the most sought after agencies in Amsterdam is not easy when you also have to do these kind of webinars every month. So thanks a lot for making the time and being with us.
It's great fun, Joachim. You do the same for you. I mean, it's fun collaborating, and it's maybe the end of this series, but I'm sure we'll dream up something next. So let's see what we come up with.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So on behalf of the whole Daydo team, Journey Management is here to stay. So we'll see all of you soon, hopefully. I am going to share, for the ones who are joining us today, the checklist. So to all in the group, hang on. Can I publish this? Yes, all panelists and attendees, I'm going to share it. So this is the checklist. You can do it right now. And there's one bonus. The end of the checklist, you can also put in your email address if you would like Harold or me or both of us to give you a personal recommendation on what to do next based on your checklist. If you don't want that, skip the question. You'll just get the score and see how you're doing. But if you want, we will reach out to you and help you figure out the next step on your path to redefining customer journey management. So everyone at home, thank you for joining. It was a blast. And on behalf of all of us today, see you soon and have a great day.